So as of July 9th, which is when I'm recording this video, 22 NBA teams should be in Orlando and ready to start their training camps. So I am going to be going through each of these teams video by video and talking about what I expect from each of these teams. And we're also going to be predicting their games, talking about what their strengths are. It should be pretty fun. And today we're starting off with the punching bag teams. I've called these teams the punching bag teams because they don't really deserve to be in Orlando, but the NBA needs them here because they need enough games for their TV deal, and they also just need them here to make it easier to schedule things. So, let's get on to it. We are going to start off with, in my opinion, the worst team in Orlando, the Washington Wizards. First and foremost, we got to talk about the Wizards' best player, Bradley Beal, who has opted out of Orlando after a shoulder injury, and he's been averaging 30.5 points per game this season on 45.5% shooting, 35% from 3, 4 rebounds, 6 assists, and he has just been phenomenal this year. He would have been an all-star, but he was injured right before the voting for a pretty extensive amount of time, and that's why he wasn't. I still think he should have been an all-star. That's just my opinion. But he has been really, really amazing this season, and he is going to be a huge loss for the Wizards, of course. Even with him, I didn't have a very high opinion of the Wizards, and without him, I have an even lower opinion, and I think they are the worst team that is going to be at Orlando. And it gets even worse for the Washington Wizards as their second leading scorer, Davis Bertans, is opting out of Orlando, and he's basically doing this to save his free agent stock, and this is just really, really bad for Washington. First of all, they are a full offense, zero defense team pretty much. They are not a good defensive team. They have the tendency to score a ton of points though, but losing your two leading scorers, you're not going to score as much, obviously. He's been averaging just under 15.5 points per game, 43% from the field, 42% from 3, 4.5 rebounds per game, and about 1.7 assists. So he is going to be another big loss for the Washington Wizards. I don't know. They're just not going to be doing very well in Orlando, I'll tell you that. Now we're just going to quickly go through their depth chart. To be frank, there's not a lot to talk about with the Washington Wizards as far as their depth chart goes. But you've got Shabazz Napier starting at point guard. I mean, okay. Shooting guard, Troy Brown Jr. has had to step in with Bradley Beal not able to play. Jerome Robinson, he was traded from the Clippers in a 3-team trade earlier this year. He hasn't done too much. Rui Hachimura, he's shown flashes of being a nice young player. Thomas Bryant hasn't played NBA basketball in quite a while, so I don't know what to expect from him. Ish Smith is coming off the bench. He's a good backup point guard. Really, really good handle. He's quick. He runs the offense pretty well. He was better than Reggie Jackson at stretches when he was on the Pistons. Then you have Isaac Bonga off the bench and also Mo Wagner, who were both on the Lakers and were traded away to free up cap space for Anthony Davis. And this is, as you can tell, not a great roster. They don't really deserve to be here, but they're here and they're going to do their best. And it'll be nice to see those younger guys play, I guess. Troy Brown Jr., Jerome Robinson, Rui Hachimura, and I guess the two guys off the bench, Bonga and Wagner, but not expecting too much from any of them in this Orlando restart with them being rusty and everything. We'll just see how it goes. So the Wizards, they are pretty much an all-offense, zero-defense team. They are 13th in offensive rating, which is pretty good considering the talent they have is not top tier or anything. They can definitely score a load of points, but at the same time they give up a crazy amount of points. 30th in defensive rating. Their bench has actually been pretty productive this season, 13th in bench plus or minus, and they've been given the ninth strength of schedule, which is a little bit difficult for them considering, in my opinion, they are the worst team in Orlando. Now on to their schedule. I've got them losing to Phoenix in their first game of the restart. And Phoenix just has more star power. Devin Booker is going to play. DeAndre Ayton is also going to play. And they just have a better team at the moment than the Wizards. Then you've got the Nets, who everyone on their team is basically dropping out. Karis LeVert's still playing, I guess, but a lot of starters lost for this Brooklyn Nets squad. I'm going to give the Wizards that win because honestly it could go either way. But every other game here, these are some playoff teams in there. Then you've got New Orleans, who is fighting for their playoff lives. I don't see them dropping a game to Washington. So if I had to choose, I'd say they go 1-7, but they could win up to 2 games, I think. That's all I'd give them at the very most. There's a very real possibility that they don't win a single one either. So, yeah, let's move on to the Phoenix Suns. So Dwight Howard's going to be joining us for this part of the video and tuning in because we're going to start off with the Phoenix Suns by talking about Kelly Oubre. He's been averaging 18.7 points per game this season, 45% from the field, 35% from 3, that's pretty decent, 6.4 rebounds, 1.5 assists, and 1.3 steals. So as you can see, this would be a pretty huge blow to the Suns, and it is a huge blow because right now his situation, albeit a little bit foggy, what we know is he is not going to be playing right away. He did undergo some knee surgery towards the end of the season before the shutdown, so we're going to see how that works for this team. We're not sure if he's actually going to come back at this moment, because there's a really small window to make this work where he's able to return. But we'll see if he's able to return. So let's take a look at the Suns without Kelly Oubre. You've got Ricky Rubio, Devin Booker, of course, and then Mikal Bridges is going to step in for Kelly Oubre. Dario Saric is there, DeAndre Ayton. Then you've got Eli Okabo off the bench, Javon Carter, you've got Cameron Johnson, and then you've got Aaron Baines, who he's got a whole fan club on Twitter from what I know. So they are going to be without Kelly Oubre at least for the beginning portion, possibly the whole thing, but they have not ruled him out. The lineup definitely takes a hit without him, but Mikal Bridges is not any pushover or anything. He can definitely defend really, really well, actually. So we'll see how that goes for them. We know what Devin Booker is capable of. DeAndre Ayton, he's been having a pretty good season since after the suspension with the PEDs or whatever. And yeah, the bench isn't that great or anything, but it's decent. So how exactly are the Suns at, well, offense and defense? And they're pretty much middle of the pack. You know, they've got a talented little assembly of young players. Oubre, Booker, Ayton, Bridges has shown really nice things. You know, things like that. They have a nice little core of players, I guess, but they just don't really rank anywhere too exceptionally. And then bench, they're 23rd, and then strength of schedule, they actually get the 6th toughest strength of schedule. So yeah, it's going to be very, very tough for them to actually make it into the playoffs. It was already tough for them, you know, only 8 games to actually do something, and you're 6 games behind. They were doomed from the start, and that is why they're here in the punching bag tier. So now I'm going to predict how they're going to do. I'm going to start it off. I said already with the Wizards, I think the Suns are going to win that first game. So I think they're going to win that one. It's definitely possible that the Wizards can win. Then you take on Dallas, who they're actually tied in the season series, but I'm going to give that one to Dallas. Then against the Clippers, they did steal one early in the season, but the Clippers are on a mission for the title. I'm going to give it to LA. Then the Pacers, I'm going to also give it to the Pacers, who are a steady, sound playoff team, even without Victor Oladipo. I'll be talking about them later, of course. The Heat, I see them losing to the Heat and losing to the Thunder. And even though they do lead the season series against the Sixers, that was only one game. I'm not putting too much stock in it. The Sixers are going to have their players back from injury and everything. And then against the Mavericks, I'm going to give them an L there, but they could definitely win that one, to be honest. And, yeah, I'm going to give them a win range of 0-3 on this, but I have them going 1-7. So, now let's move on to the San Antonio Spurs. So, starting off with the San Antonio Spurs, LaMarcus Aldridge is going to be out with an injury, and that's a pretty big loss for San Antonio, but their season, to be honest, is basically over. Aldridge has regressed this year. You can see his stats are almost all down from last year. And it's just been a tale of regression for this Spurs team, and they just don't seem ready to make a playoff push or anything like that. If I recall correctly, they're about 5 games out of the 8th seed at the moment, so the Grizzlies have to win 3 games for the Spurs to basically just be out no matter what. And yeah, it's a tough road ahead right now for San Antonio, just because it doesn't seem like they're willing to adapt to the modern NBA. But I'll get to all of that a little later. Taking a look at their depth chart, you've got DeJounte Murray at point guard. I am still a huge believer in him. I think his offensive game has gotten better this year. It still has room to grow, of course, but he has definitely improved this season, and he's always going to be a great defender. Bryn Forbes, we know what he brings. He's a shooter. He can defend, I guess. Yeah, DeMar DeRozan, it hasn't really worked out super well here for him in San Antonio. You know, it's whatever. Sometimes it's just not going to work out. I don't blame either party for that. Trey Lyles at power forward and then Jakob Poeltl at center. Those are two guys. I guess they play disciplined enough. They're Spurs kind of players. Derek White, who I'm still a pretty big fan of. I haven't paid that much attention to him, but during that series against the Nuggets last season, I really, really liked what he brought. He's a very Spurs player as well. Patty Mills, he's been around the block. He hustles. He makes plays, I guess, but he's a shooter. Then you've got Lonnie Walker, who's had an okay second season. His first year he didn't play much. Rudy Gay off the bench here at power forward, and he's a scorer, of course. When he first signed with the Spurs, it didn't seem like a great fit because he's an isolation type of player. Honestly, it's worked out pretty well for both parties. He has done well with his NBA career here to prolong it. And then you've got Tyler Zeller, who is just a worse version of his brother, I think, Cody Zeller. And Cody Zeller's not anything special, of course. Obviously, coach is Greg Popovich. And Greg Popovich, I really do think he's the greatest coach of all time. I wasn't around for Phil Jackson, really. So I hold a bit of partiality to Greg Popovich, who have actually seen do things. But that being said, he has not really evolved with the modern NBA, and it is kind of holding the Spurs back. Adding on to what I said before, this is not really like a Greg Popovich team. They're decent offensively, but they are not a good defensive team like the Spurs usually are. It's really quite odd. It doesn't feel like the Spurs this year, honestly. And I think that's the reason they haven't made the playoffs. They just don't feel like the Spurs. Yeah. And then you've got them 9th in bench plus or minus. I guess that's decent, but it's not spectacular or anything like that. and then 11th in strength of schedule. So, yeah, let's just predict how they'll do here. So let's take a look at this schedule here. They've got the Sacramento Kings. I'm going to give them an L, but they could take a W there. Then they've got the Grizzlies. I don't see them winning that one with a team hungry for a playoff spot like the Grizzlies and to keep their spot, I mean. And you've got the Sixers, who are also going to be battling for seeding and all that. They just have much more on the line, even though the Spurs are not in the playoffs. You guys get what I'm saying, though. Denver, they have a really, really tough schedule. They're going to have to take advantage of games like the one against the Spurs. Then you've got Utah on a back-to-back. I'm going to give Utah the win there, but I'm not sure. Utah, I don't think they're going to fall off the face of the earth or anything, but I don't think they'll be as potent. The Pelicans, I'm going to give them a loss there as well, but they could win it. That's a game that, you could see the Spurs going in there and stealing. The Rockets, I'm going to give them an L there. And then once again against the Utah Jazz, I'm going to give them a W, end of the season. The Jazz might be tuned out at that point, ready for the playoffs, so I'll give them a win right there. So I have them going 1-7, but realistically, I wouldn't be surprised to see them win 4 of these games. 2 or 3 is probably more likely than 4, but I've got them going 1-7 at the moment. And so, yeah, that's going to wrap it up for this video. I am going to be moving on to fringe playoff teams next time, which is going to be the Nets and the Magic in the East, and then you've got in the West the Grizzlies, the Blazers, the Kings, and the Pelicans. So those teams, I'm going to be talking about them in the next one. Then we're going to go on to playoff teams, and then finally contenders. So it's going to be a nice little fun time with all these previews before the NBA actually gets started again. And it's going to be exciting. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.